Renaldo Hudson is an educator, minister, and community organizer and focuses his work on ending perpetual punishment in Illinois. After being sentenced to death row, Hudson worked for 37 years while incarcerated in the Illinois Department of Corrections, where he became a leader, educator, and founder. Hudson developed and implemented groundbreaking programs inside the Department of Corrections, including the prison newspaper Stateville Speaks and the Building Block Program, a transformational program run by incarcerated people within the Illinois Department of Corrections. Hudson's work and life have been featured in media outlets including the BBC, Chicago Tribune, Chicago Magazine, and others. His story and work to create back-end mechanisms for the release of incarcerated people is the subject of the documentary Stateville Calling. He was released in September 2020 when Governor Pritzker commuted his life sentence and joined Illinois Prison Project as its Director of Education later that year. Oh man, what a time I had with Renaldo. We've been talking for a few months, and even before we started recording, he got a call from prison, and he took the call, and I got to see third party just kind of witness from the sidelines the work he does, and I'm telling you, it's amazing, it's encouraging. He doesn't stop. He's a hustler and learned so much, and what a valuable human being. Please listen, enjoy. So get mad. Stay blessed.
All right. Well, welcome to another Get Mad Crusade episode. Today, we have with us Renaldo Hudson out of Chicago area. Had the privilege of getting to know and meet Renaldo through a series of fun, random mutual connections, ironically through coffee, which is kind of crazy. And Renaldo is currently working with Illinois Prison Project, which you'll hear in his bio. But we're here to just hear stories and kind of learn a little bit about a side of things I think we probably don't know a whole lot about. And so, Renaldo, welcome to the show. Yeah. 37 years in prison, man. And here you are.
Right, man. Like, I am by far, in my humble opinion, a living example of a miracle. And it's not because of how deserving I was or am. I think that sometimes people lose sight of the fact that many of us, and I take ownership of that us that I just used, are actually people who actually committed offenses and went to prison because of things we've done. And so I actually spent 37 years in the Illinois Department of Correction, 7 years in the Cook County Jail, and then I was sentenced to execution. And so then I spent 13 years on Illinois' death row. And in 2003, the former Governor Ryan commuted my death sentence to life without the possibility of parole. Well, I spent another 17 years in the Illinois Department of Correction, serving life without the possibility of parole. And then in 2020, Governor Pritzker, a second governor, commuted my life sentence to time considered served. And so I want to say this again. I think it's vitally important for people to understand. I am the product of lightning striking twice, if you will, because according to circumstances, I should have died in prison. And I think really one of the reasons I'm able to sustain my humility is I remember every day that in my most broken state, I took a person's life. And I think that that should never be minimized. I personally have never minimized it. In fact, from the day of my arrest to the day I walked out of prison, I was attempted to take accountability and responsibility for my act. But our adversarial or our system as it is set up in a way that you're told to shut up and don't say anything. I don't know, brother Michael, if you're familiar with the Miranda warning. So when you are arrested, the first thing they say to you is you have a right to remain silent, right? Most people heard that on television, but that's a real thing, right? And so the system itself sets you up in a way that even if you wanted to own your behavior, you can't, right? And so the system began to work itself, and ultimately it came down to the decision that there was nothing redeemable about me, that my act was so horrific that I deserved to die. But I say to people, this is why scripture, and I don't want to start preaching to you, but the scripture teach me I take the foolish things of this world to confound the wise. That's intentional language, because what it said to me is, as foolish as I am and can be, grace saw me. And so anyway, to answer your question, that was long, but
no, yeah, I love it. I love it. So what I'm hearing then is it sounds like you're a very unique case of just you're at the mercy of politicians. I mean, to some degree, right? So you have different governors, and then they.
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I benefited from the behavior of politics, but I was not. I am placed in position because I believe that there's a grace on high that comes down low and speak, bro. Sure. And so I was never subject to them because I immediately confessed my sins to God, right? And so there's a trajectory that became apparent before I ever had a sense of seeing it, right? But politicians will be politicians, right? But I care more about people. I care about the people that's sitting on the farm, right? Drinking milk and eating cornbread, right? That recognize I still want to believe that no matter how far or how hard we fall, there's still reason to have hope. And I get to be a walking example of hope.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what I meant too, that I'm intrigued by is like, if something gets commuted, it's like, okay, life without parole. Well, now in your head, you're just thinking, cool. All right, I'm here. Man.
Yes.
But then all of a sudden a new governor comes in or whoever's,
Oh, no. It wasn't that. It's not that simplistic. Like it's a lot to go in. Like what I didn't share with you is that when I walked into prison, I couldn't read or write. If you would have asked me to spell my name, right, and you'll send me a check for $1 million, you would still have your $1 million because I couldn't spell my own name. The police in my confession wrote my name and said, that's your name. Put your initial. Think about this. In 1983, I was initialing stuff, right? Because I couldn't write my name. And so the mental disbalance is there, right? To fight through that. To when I walked out in 2020, I walked out with a bachelor's degree. Which means that there was a change, there was an evolution of who I became, right? And not just the person that was responsible for an act. Because what we have allowed to happen is our system of justice makes justice about the person and not the system. And when it personalizes it like that, and say things, we the people, right, must seek justice. I'm the person that says, well, what is justice? Is justice predicated or defined by revenge? Because those are two separate words. So we need to define what justice is to us. So for me, I began to go through the process of not wanting to die. My personal transformation to the person that I am today occurred because there was a triggering in my mind that I wanted to be better than the act I was responsible for.
When did that happen? Is there a defining moment you feel like?
Yes.
And how many years in were you at that point?
I was maybe 9 years in. And I'll be really honest with you. And this is out on video. You can catch it. I've said this before. I was actually on death row. And we used to be on our different birthdays. We could go to different rec rooms, and they would let us take cake, and they would let us take our little wines and go to the rec room and have an hour and a half little, party, if you will, for 10 death row people, right? And so this one day I went to the yard and none of my buddies was on the yard. And so I was like, man, like, where is everyone? Right? And so what happened was, this is my hat I like.
I love it.
Right? I actually was struggling because none of my buddies was out there, like on the yard with me. And so we get showers after the yard. So one of my buddies came to the shower next door to me because we have one person showers right on death row. And so I'm like, hey man, where was everybody? Right? And he said, it was so-and-so birthday, Nardo. I said, hey. I said, why you ain't tell me? Like, man, I would have been to the party. You know, I like to come to the party. He said, Nardo. I don't know how to tell you this, man, but the brothers didn't want you at the party. I was like, what? Wait a minute. Let me take my hat off and say this. You're telling me that death row inmates, and I'm using that word right now intentionally because I fight against the use of that word, right? They saying they don't want to be around me. Can you imagine Michael Myers and Jason and Freddy Krueger deciding, right? They don't want to hang with you. They're like, ew, like, Renaldo, we heard about you. Like, you're the monster. Right? I'm like, this is how I took that. And so I ended up making, and this happened like maybe a week later. This is one incident, right? But it had happened in sequence. So I ended up getting into an altercation with a staff member and I went to segregation. And so one of the brothers brought me this tape where this minister was talking about, who are you good for or are you good for nothing? And I'll be really frank with you. It was Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I thought when I saw his name, he finna beat the white man down, right? Right? Go ahead, Farrakhan. And so he started talking. He said, listen, we can study the chronological footprint. Like I remember this tape, like I remember a song, right? He said, we can trace the chronological history of the white man all over the earth. In fact, they have a plant called the white man's footprint. And everywhere, if you just want to find out where he's been, just go look to see where that plant exists. I was like, oh man, I can't never forget that. I'm gonna let the white man know. I know who you are, white man. Right? And I'm listening to this stuff, right? And then he flipped the script. He said, hey, but look, do anybody like you? So I know we could talk about them. He said, but anybody like you? Can anybody trust you? If you were to die today, would anyone care? I was like, oh man, dang, that ain't what I was wanting to hear, right? He said, man, who can trust you? Who care about what's going on with you? And from that day, this was in 1993. From that day to this day, I've been on the road of personal transformation to be the best possible human being I could be. And so my change and transition didn't occur because of the idea of ever walking out of prison. I decided that I didn't want to die being good for nothing or no one. Yeah, and so that's when that happened. I know that was a long story, but
no, man, I love it, and I think, I mean, like, I'm like, it's like I was going to ask you, like, what do you think is justice? And now I'm sitting there going, you just said it, like, almost like for the individual, it almost feels like justice to a degree can be like the individual honoring himself and herself and trying to become a better person, even if it's still within those walls.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating move.
No, and it's real. And I'll be honest with you, not to be getting on bolstering, but everything I share with you is pretty much public document. You can chase, you know how they say, chase the word, chase where the word comes from, right? You can chase the word down and you'll find that Renaldo is like, he's telling his story as honestly and as transparently as he can, right? That doesn't mean that I'm not fraud and I could like fuzzy stuff like anybody else, right? And I do get that, right? But what I'm telling you now is the absolute truth, right? And so through this process, I began to see vision about, and I'm not talking about, it was a vision from heaven. That's not what I'm talking about. I began with intellect comes vision. Mm-hmm. Like the person that tell you they're intelligent and they don't have no vision, they telling you a damn lie. Mm-hmm. Like there's no way you're intelligent and you don't have a vision. That's what measures your intelligence. What is wrong with you? You have to be able to see stuff, right? I can see the answer in that. I can see the equation. I can, don't know. I have to, where there is no vision, people perish. And so people have vision. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just, my brain is running. So I'm just sitting there going, okay, like, so would you say that, is that a large reason why people, not even specifically Black people, but like low income socioeconomic status people who tend to have more issues with not just incarceration, but other, crimes and stuff like that, is because poor education, but then also no vision. So then there's like,
absolutely,
you don't get educated, you don't have vision. If you don't have vision, well, then the only vision I know is maybe to make a bunch of money off of selling drugs. Think
about this. You're a businessman, right?
Mm-hmm. I'd like to think I'm decent at it.
I'm saying, but you are whatever. If you're decent or not, is not question. But you're a businessman, and so you have to know business 101. What is the product? What is the demand for the product? And how do I present this product at a reasonable price that make a profit for me? That's business 101. Like if people want to say, you want to go to college and learn business, come talk to me for 5 minutes. I can break this down. But most people can't do the equation to get there. Right? So that's what we're talking about. And so because of that factor, then we make foolish, goofy decisions that seem so horrific. And they're really the basic vomit. To be really honest, right? It's the vomit of ignorance. Mm-hmm. And people don't want to name that because they want to have something to beat. They want to have something to blame. But it's simply ignorance. It's the vomit of ignorance. Ignorance has a byproduct, and its byproduct is violence and robbery and rape and murder and stealing, right? And so I was able to comprehend that while still incarcerated, which freed me. Because I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I'm better than all of that. I will never, no matter what happened to me, I'll never do anything else to harm another human being. And I've been walking that. I'm so grateful. Like it's so empowering because people say, how do you get empowered? You get empowered by learning who you are. Mm-hmm. Right? And so no one can tell me who I am. Right? They can see the character that I am. Like I got this hat thing, right? So I'll be like, hey. Like this is I said that and I know you saw that, right? But for me, like, I don't care what nobody say, this is the coolest hat in the world, right? And I'm in pursuit of those. That's kind of like my thing. Like, I want the best hats that's out there, right? But I'm not going to spend goofy money to get it. I'm just going to walk up on the blessings that exist in the world, right? And enjoy them and then pass it to the next person. Anyway, to go back to the questions. So yes, it's actually interconnected, brother. Like the criminal legal system as it exists is connected to the brokenness of our society where our humanity isn't measured appropriately. And so we're used as scapegoats because of the lack of access to knowledge, right? Okay. What was the rule? What was the most punishable rule during slavery? Not to make this political, not to make this racist, but to make it a point. It was, if you teach them to read, they'll be able to see out of oppression. Right. And so, like, they didn't use that language, but that's basically what it was, right? Right. And it's the same thing. Once I began to educate myself, I saw out of my oppression. I saw out of my viciousness to try to figure out how to survive. Because that's where violence comes from. Yeah. Right? Trying to have an image, trying to have a sense of power.
Right. Okay, so I got like 5 directions I want to go, but I want to keep digging on this idea of justice tied to education because I think,
yes,
like, first of all, my brain goes to like, well, look, I know a lot of highly educated people that are also ignorant about themselves. So there's almost 2 points to the education. There's the textbook education, which is valuable and needed, but then there's also like the education of like, I don't want to use the word philosophy, but like who we are, who I am, or whatever. But I'm almost curious because you said something before we even started the call. You said, can injustice exist for the guilty? Can injustice exist for the guilty? And I don't know what it's like to have someone close to me have their life taken, right? And then have to know that person and know they're in prison and consider, am I okay with them being rehabilitated and get out or anything like that? But, and I imagine that's very difficult. But if we take a step back and don't personalize it, and I know that's probably impossible for the people that it was personal to,
right?
Because I think that's what happens as we personalize things. And to hopefully explain this very quickly, I got an email recently where a guy accused me of talking about the drug war ignorantly because he had a son in psych wards and had all these drug issues and addictions. And I said, like, I'm really sorry about your son, but like, you can't use your one personal experience to talk about something that's affecting millions of people. Right. And so, okay, so let's depersonalize it and talk about what does it mean for an individual who commits a crime, but now we can see the whys in terms of education and ignorance and all that stuff, but then also the justice of educating them and that bringing their healing. I mean, that wasn't really a question, but just talk to me about that, because I think that's a fascinating way to think about it.
I'll give you an example. I think hands down, my story is so unique and individualized, and it's amazing and all that. One of the things my lawyer, Jennifer Sobel, the executive director of the Illinois Prison Project, has helped me to see was that my story was systemically connected to a tremendously majority of people that are incarcerated. There's such similarities in practices and behavior that gets us to the symptom that go unaddressed. And because of that, it goes to the question that we talked about a little bit off camera, which was, what does society owe to the guilty? What does society owe, right, to those that are not, innocent, right? And I'm saying it owes the very best it has to give. And I think to not measure that as fairly as that or unfairly as that might sound on the surface to a victim of an offense, right? The reality is, as a society, in my opinion, humanity loses every time we strip away the humanity of anyone. When I took the life of Mr. Folk Peterson, this is my personal belief. People fight with me all the time about it. I say, you don't get to decide that for me. But a portion of my humanity went in the ground with Mr. Peterson. That is my personal belief. I can never walk away from the shame of being so low in the developmental stages of humanity that I was willing to take someone's life. Until we begin to educate the public about that reality, right? I think people make better decisions when they're better informed. That's why in the Department of Correction, for example, they hire what's called peer educators. And the peer educators are trained to teach the privileges and the rights of the incarcerated population. Now, when that process works, it makes the job of the staff extremely easy. So why wouldn't you not take this practice that you've proven to work and put it in humanity, and then train everyone to be able to function? Because we're dealing with this struggle because the majority of people are struggling. It's not like it's the majority. And it's mainly out of ignorance. And ignorance is not just if you know your ABCs, right? But it's like the different ignorance come in the form of understanding. The moment I go to a car dealership and I get the baddest car on the lot, the moment I pull that boy off the lot, it depreciates in value. Why is that important? That's important because most people that are in poverty look for symbols of being all right. And they go buy all these stupid cars and stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's a sign of a sickness of ignorance. Because the people that are rich, I remember Ross Perot. I don't know if you remember who that is.
Perot, yeah. I mean, it's
right?
I was a kid, but yeah.
Okay, but he used to drive this little damn Chevy. And he used to laugh. He was a billionaire. He said, "This car gets me in everywhere I need to go." Right? It don't get there no slower than that Mercedes Benz, I tell you. And I thought that was the funniest stuff in the world.
Yeah.
But it went past everybody. I think like they didn't just peep what this dude just said. But it's ignorance. You see what I'm saying? Anyway.
So there's data. I mean, so there's a couple. I mean, the first question I think people have to be challenged with is, do we believe in the ability or the idea of someone being able to rehabilitate? And then if the answer is yes, despite the crime, then
okay, I'll tell you what. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, well, I'm just thinking like, so, I mean, it's not as simply a no answer, but then it's like you mentioned data. It's like your lawyer has data. There's data, plots and points to show a correlation to these people that generally commit this crime. This is what it's connected to. And I think that right there should be the first talking point to go, okay, if there's a correlation and say it's 80%, 90%, high enough that it justifies the conversation, then what is the issue? Okay, the issue is lack of education and ignorance. Okay, then what does that mean? If that means we not only need maybe better education in certain parts of the country and for everyone, accessible for everyone, but then also what does it mean to educate the person that committed the crime after the crime? I mean, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like how does that exist in prison? I don't know anything about that. Like what is it? Is it prison to prison, state to state, programs that they have? What is the education opportunities like?
It's horrific in Illinois. That's the only prison system I can bear witness to. Mm-hmm. I give you an example. One of the things that happened for me was I said to a deputy director of the Department of Correction one day, "Man, let me get in school." And he said to me, which I guess makes sense when you think about it. He said, "Hudson, why would I waste the resources to educate you? We're going to execute you." He looked me, I was in the cell, he looked me in my face and said that stuff to me. I said, "Dad, I want to be better than this, man. I ain't listening to you." Now imagine if I would have listened to him, right? I would probably—
Was that after your conversion? Was that after 93 or before?
Yeah, it was during the process, process, mm-hmm, right? Because I was struggling to figure out, okay, now how do I be better?
Right.
I wasn't thinking about, brother, I'm telling you, I wasn't thinking about being free until way down the road when I began to see the world from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. Because your perceived perception is vitally important to what you would achieve in life, if you ask me. Mm-hmm. Like most of the people that are successful don't doubt that they can be successful. I just don't believe that. I don't think it's room for that. In order for your business, as a business person, right, to be successful, you got to believe you can do it. Now, you may struggle with strategies and figuring out, okay, I need to do this over here different. I learned this because I trusted this particular practice to someone that wasn't ready to invest in what I needed them to invest in. You can go through all that stuff, but the basic principles never change. And how I perceive myself from the fact that the Department of Correction took resources from education, because they have research on the other side, Brother Michael, which is I can increase in the extent in which we can keep this person, because if we can keep them blind longer, then we can walk them around longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. The longer you keep me blind, the longer you have control of where I go. And that's what we see in society.
Yeah, definitely, right? It's not just in the prisons, I mean, it's
that's why I said that, like that society.
Right.
I'm sorry, but I'm getting philosophical too. I'm kind of like—
No, well, look, we're a philosophical company. So I like it. Yeah. And I think we need more of that, honestly, in our conversations these days. So talk to me about your education then, because you're an educator now. You now work with Illinois Prison Project. You are now doing what you probably would have been amazing for you to have 30 years ago. Tell us a little bit about your work with IPP and tell us kind of how are you changing that narrative for people in prison? And just for those who know, before we started recording, he got a call and I listened in on it. So this is Renaldo's life, is call after call after call. So
yeah. Like, first of all, I don't just work for the Illinois Prison Project. I am a part of the leadership of the Illinois Prison Project. I sit in the leadership meetings, and I help to wrestle, what I think is like, issues that we should be a part of and influencing, right? I also head a department, the education department for the Illinois Prison Project, where we actually have an assistant director. We have a program manager. We about to hire, that position just opened, and we have 2 navigators in my department. Think about this. I'm less than 2 years out of prison, and I'm managing a team of almost 8 people, right? And then within that program, what we're doing, because it's the education department, of our desire and our intentions of ending mass incarceration and of what we refer to as perpetual punishment, which meaning people dying in prison and they shouldn't die there, right? I just don't believe it in the case of anyone, if you ask me. I don't think no one is their worst act, right? I think people should be held accountable and responsible, but we have to have a system, in my humble opinion, that seeks the best of people and give everyone at least the opportunity to petition being free. If never left free, at least give me the opportunity to legitimately and honestly and fairly petition you to say, here's why I think I should be free. I know what I did. I know what I did. I took the life of Mr. Folk Peterson in a horrific way in 1983. I do not deserve the grace that I received, but because I received it, I have to go about educating and sharing with people what hope deferred does, what it looks like. And hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when it comes, it's like a tree of life. And so for me, I'm like, man, there's no way I can't use the rest of my life to the day they throw dirt over my face. I'm going to be out educating people everywhere they will invite me. In fact, I tell people all the time, if you invite us, we'll show up, right? From the south side to the north side to the east side to the west side. In fact, I remember a few weeks ago, we was driving in the city. I'm like, dang, I didn't realize how big Illinois is and how all the different.
Right? Oh my gosh.
It's insanely big, right? And we was driving for it was like, man, 2 hours. I was like, dang, dude. And I was saying, because I'm the director, right? And so it was me and the program manager at the time, who's now the assistant director, and one of the navigators, Naviel. And he was driving, but it was on my dime, right? Because I was paying for everything, because I got to do the reimbursement and I got to justify. Anyway, we're doing that work. We're doing the dangerous one-sided narrative, which we teach, right, for people to say, hey, listen, here's the whole scenario and not just a portion. Understand systemic racism for what it is. It's a philosophy and not a white face. I'm not chasing white people around like they demons and ghosts and stuff. Ooh, the white man. It's not you and the melanin or the lack thereof of the melanin in your skin that makes you evil. It's your philosophy. And so I'm fighting the dangerous narrative that have the people who have the philosophy of punish, and be tough on them. Like there's ads in Illinois right now for the governorship where the opponent is talking about take the cuffs off the police and put them back on the people, right? Short, they're saying take the cuffs off the police and put them back on black folks, right? Wow. My thing is, how about have a conversation that humanizes both sides? Because I don't believe simply because you put on a uniform and a badge, you instantly become a monster and a horrible person. I just don't believe that. I think that there are some amazing people that just have a horrible job and they have to try to figure out, you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe I can't, I know people who have left, right? They try to hey, you know what? I can't be the me I need to be. I'm out of here. I literally have people in my life, right? That I'm like, I'm glad you made that decision, right? But I'd rather you be in that decision when I get stopped by the car. See, people think too narrow. That's why you have to understand narrow concepts and broader concepts, right? In the narrow context, defund the police, people making all those speeches, right? I say defund them, and then what? What if the doggone purgers show up since they know that there's no police and they decide they want your stuff? I mean, it's stuff that happens that we have to figure out. How does the community begin to patrol itself, where then you don't need people walking around with weapons, because the weapons that kill will be removed, and the weapons that give life, which is the brain, right, and intellect, develops hope and inspire people to do greater things. Mm-hmm. So I believe, man, with all due respect, like it's gonna take all of us and not just some of us.
Amen, dude. You're a breath of fresh air, Renaldo. It's very discouraging, because when you look at the wider conversation nowadays, and you know, I don't want to just blame social media, but it's like, not only do we seem to be getting more polarized, but like the conversations just, from the gate, they're too heated. And it's like, how do we humanize people? I think this is the concept when we talk about, like, for us, like, I kind of have this mission statement of be curious, seek nuance, and find presence.
Yeah.
The find presence is actually more for me. How do I live presence? But all of it's for me, I guess, in terms of being curious and nuance. But it's like doing those things means you have to humanize everyone. And I don't care if you do have a badge on or you've been on death row. It's like, how do we see the full narrative? How do we have the conversation? How do I just hear your life story? Like that already is opening my mind to seeing a different angle and lens that is different from anything I've known from my own experience, which is absolutely necessary. So I love it, man. I love it. And yeah, I mean,
no, this is real, because I give you an example. If I decided to like just talk crazy about the people in corrections, just they're all monsters and right, then this is what would get lost in that conversation. When I couldn't read, an officer walked past the door, like was walking past the cell, and opened the door and said, "Why you always watching TV? You're never reading." And I said, "Because I can't read." And from that day, right, till I earned my GED, she would stop at the door and say, "Turn that damn TV off and read this sentence." When she come on and work, she is forever a part of my personal survival, my personal character, all that I will ever be in public and private, right? Because she invested in me, and she was a beautiful dude. I want to make this clear. She was fine as hell. You know, like she was fine. Like I was like, shit, like, you know, she must like me, because I also got all my, insecurities as a male. But I'm in a prison setting to me. Ain't no way she investing all this time in me, and she wants some. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is, it never went there. It didn't. It never went there. They never compromised their integrity, but they invested in me. If anything, they helped me to understand the humanity that can exist in a monster outfit, right? And so the reason people are frightened of law enforcement is because of the damn people in uniform, not the uniform. That's why I don't immediately. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm saying absolutely. I mean, and that's true for any profession, right? I mean,
yeah, think about it, man. You probably know people that's like working in them spaces. You may not want to, it may not be smart to even say it. Oh, yeah. My fishing buddy, right, is the captain of whatever. But, brother, some of my hardest moments, and I'll just say this, and I know I'll probably get it, man, depending on some of the real liberal friends of mine here. Hey, you traitor. Hey, you almost sound like you're voting for Donald Trump. But what I'm saying is, I don't want anyone to be disqualified because I couldn't see their humanity, because all I could see is what I didn't like about them. And that happens from the liberal table, and that happens from the conservative table. What the table that it doesn't happen on is the table that we control the dangerous narrative. And I'm so glad to be leading the charge to remind people we get to control narratives when we control power dynamics, which is videos, audios, etc., and we put our truth out unapologetically.
Yeah.
That's where the power lies. Because that's the stuff that people will invest in, right? Like I bet, you tell me if I'm wrong, I think our segment's gonna be one of your most popular segments, right? But you tell me, you be like, no, dude, people weren't feeling you at all. Like, please let me know. I'll be like,
I will.
Okay, right? Maybe like, it was horrific. Like I didn't believe how much hate mail I got. Them people telling me, well, we can't stand that big colored, right? But
I will be curious because I mean, we're not really like we are really getting more philosophical on a human element, but honestly, I think that we almost need to go back to that.
Yeah, I believe it. That's why I do it. I'll be honest. I'm good at I'll be really honest. I'm pretty intentional when I do this to interviews because what I've noticed is we're so formative, we're so informal, right? That we get into our mode. Okay, here's the line of questioning. Right here's right, and then we don't leave room for common sense to roll up in people. Like I believe common sense is gonna say to people, you know what? Damn, I don't like what he did, but I like who the fuck he is now. Excuse my language.
Right. Now
real talk.
Okay, I have kind of two trends of thoughts I want to hit on. One is citizenship of freedom. You mentioned earlier the idea of citizenship of freedom. I've been thinking more about that, particularly because one of our recent interviews with Dr. Carl Hart, who's a neuroscientist and really studies the legalization of drugs. And, you know, he's controversial as being a drug user himself. And, you know, one of the things he really talks a lot about in his recent book, and it's made me think a lot more about it, is just the basic concept of the Constitution, right? Like, which is like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we truly do envelop that belief to be for everyone that exists in this country, right? You know, and what's funny is I even told him, I think I can't remember if I said it on camera, after camera. I think it was after the camera. I was like, you know, like based off what you're saying with drugs, that means you definitely have to be a Second Amendment supporter, right? And he's like, absolutely. You have to be. Like, you have to, if you're willing to say that about this, you have to say it about, I was like, wow, okay, that's refreshing. Again, you might have some liberal friends that get upset, but citizenship of freedom, what does that mean to you? What is freedom, right? Like, as one who existed in theoretically complete non-freedom for 37 years.
I'm sorry, man. These M&Ms are so good.
No, I love it. I love it.
This is a really important topic right here. I am not free in the context of having all of the liberties of a so-called citizen. Mm-hmm. Because of the past, I can't exercise, I don't have no longer the right to exercise the right to bear arms. Mm-hmm. So that's my issue. Now, in terms of the fact that I'm now free to vote, I'm able to, like, those things are wonderful. I went and voted, right? The fact that I can now travel because I'm no longer on parole, right? I can go anywhere I want to go. Like, I'm getting ready to go to Utah. You know what I mean?
Is this your first trip? Is this your first trip from being out, like out of Illinois?
Oh, no. I've been all over. Like, I've been to Utah. Okay. I've been to Texas. I've been to Rhode Island. I've been to New Orleans. Like, I'm a professional speaker. That's what I do. I go.
Yeah.
Like, hello, my name is Renaldo Hudson. I spent 37 years in the Illinois Department of Correction. One of the wonderful things I did is during my incarceration, like, I can do that in my sleep. Right?
Yeah.
Wake up, be like, oh, my name is Renaldo Hudson. Right? But what I've never been is on a trip where I didn't have to have walking papers.
Right.
So this will be my first free trip where I'm actually free of wondering if they're going to find out I'm on parole and if I have permission to be where I'm going to be. Yeah. So next week, I plan on going to Utah for about a week and hang out with my little brother, right? And take pictures. And in fact, I might send you some on, right? If I ain't being chased by a bear. So I'm still kind of wrestling, like, but I still want to come to Tennessee, man. Like,
More
like what y'all do? You in Tennessee, right?
We're in Chattanooga. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, is a brother invited? Like, is a brother still cool coming down there? Like, or they be
I'd
like,
say it's pretty safe. Yeah, no, I think you're good. But yeah, I mean, there's parts maybe, but it's not too bad.
Okay, see, yeah, I ain't coming.
I don't know. Utah might be worse, honestly.
Huh?
Utah might be worse. Who knows?
You know what? I thought about that. I might cancel that trip because that's been in my head too. Like, be like, oh man, this is like, we're glad you came here, boy.
So
go ahead, bro.
What would be your ideal? This was kind of my second train of thought. So, I mean, citizenship and freedom, you're not fully free. But what does it mean? What does it mean to pursue freedom? And even from a more not fully free in the sense of certain things that you can't do because you have been incarcerated, but even someone who's in the prison system and what it means to pursue freedom, which I think we talked a little bit about with education stuff, but maybe you haven't thought about this, but I have a feeling you have. What is it on the most ideal circumstance for, say, someone who gets charged with a crime and they are guilty? What is an ideal scenario? If we redid the system from scratch, and maybe this is way too big of a question, but I'm really curious, what should exist, even if certain prisons have it and it exists, but like as a whole in a system, what could and should exist? And what would be the ideal circumstance for them to pursue justice for themselves as an individual, but then petition to have justice and freedom because they've been humanized?
From the moment they walk through the door, the concept and the philosophy of reentry should be inserted into them.
As a possibility.
As a possibility. From the gate. I used to teach orientation when people come to the facility. I used to do it at Danville, a few other facilities. And all we did was we educated them as to the resources that was available in that facility and how you go about accessing them. If you, from the moment you walk into the system, if they evaluated you and then gave you the formula or the process of, here's how we're going to try to help redevelop you, not rehabilitate you, but redevelop you, we're going to take you through this. Instead of running up and down that damn yard, right, line, right, we're going to train you in the following skill. And this is your responsibility, right? And so for me, the perfect example, prisons will become working institutions and not just housing institutions. And so in a working institution, right? But I don't want to get into that because that's actually an idea I'm working on. I'll just say it like this. If every day of your incarceration was dedicated and intentionally directed toward the redeveloping of you rather than just the housing of you, because that's a given that you're going to be housed there. But right. What is being poured into you with taxpayers' money? Because taxpayer, whatever they do or don't do, taxpayers are paying for it. So it makes more sense to give me a product that I can be proud of from my investment. If I gave you 50 grand tomorrow and said, man, I want to try to get a franchise. Maybe your franchise is much more than that, right? I don't know. But you'd be like, hey, man, nope. Like, you need to go back and get a new lender, right? Because I'm going to need this at you before I even let you use my name. I think that's what the department owes to every person that walk into the system. When you walk into the system, you don't have a name. When you walk out, you've received your name of a properly developed human being, not a properly developed citizen, because that plays to all the stereotypes of what about the people that are illegally over here who go to our system and suffer the same punishments as anyone else. Then they should have a fair shot, in my opinion, of developing who they can be. Now, what happens with expedition and all that stuff is a whole nother question.
Right. And it's complicated. I know like one of the biggest questions is probably like, how does something like that get financed? And my first thought is, well, if we can save money on all the petty crime, all the people that are in there on taxpayer dollars from petty crimes, especially things like marijuana charges, stuff like, I have a lot of extra money then.
The governor of Illinois actually commuted the sentences of people with petty drug cases.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And made a difference in our system. But the one thing I think is important is we are in position to redefine how people see the incarceral state. Because prisons can be self-containing. That's what people forget. But it became profitable to hire private companies to come in and do the work.
Right.
But prior to that, the incarcerated population was working all the jobs. And they was developing resources. And the people that you can trace back to that time period don't reoffend.
Yeah.
Because they earned an actual living during their incarceration that allowed them to walk out and pay for what they wanted their future to look like. Whereas now we have a system that people are getting rich off of producing the worst possible product, but yet selling it at the highest possible price to people's family, not so much the incarcerated people, right? If you just flip that to where everybody in prison was getting minimum wage, not even, just think about that, just minimum wage. And then they were required to have the two-thirds of that salary automatically go into an account that only be released upon their release. Do you imagine the incentive that will have? Like, you have people, man, friends of mine used to make $1 an hour in the industry, in the joint, and know what the population of the prison called those guys?
What?
Those are the billionaires of the joint.
Wow.
I mean,
no, I mean, it's a very interesting concept. But to your point, it starts with the very first thing you said, which is the idea of reentry from day one. And otherwise, why, you could say the motivation is nilch. But if there is, and I wanted to just quickly clarify, you said redevelop instead of rehabilitate. Is that a preferred way to say it in terms of even how you perceive people in terms of saying rehabilitation?
One more time.
So you earlier you said instead of rehabilitate, redevelop. Is it a preferred way to communicate about people so that the perception isn't like this, like, oh, we're rehabilitating them, like,
Absolutely. I'll give you why. And it's not just a play on language, because trends come, right? How could you rehabilitate something that was never habilitated in the first place? It's an oxymoron in a sense, right? Because you're saying we're gonna rehabilitate them. That implies that I was once okay. I wasn't. Most of the people that are committing crimes are functionally illiterates, etc. And you can literally just fill in the blanks really quickly.
I mean, it seems so simple, but it makes so much sense. And it's like, oh man, it's just like you use these words because it's what's been used. And it's like, wow, that's so fascinating.
Right. But I'm saying, once again, as an educator, my job is to think about how is this term being used and why is it significant and why is it working or not? Right. And if it's not working, right, then we should push. All the change that have come overwhelmingly, especially with respect to social justice reform, has come, if people wanted to acknowledge it or not, from the spaces of academia. Mm-hmm. If you go back to the civil rights movement and Dr. King, majority of those kids and people, man, were college students and lawyers. And you know what I'm saying? It wasn't the grassroots in the way in which people think. That stuff stirred after the academics got out there and people started following them. Right? Yeah. It's the same thing in the prison setting. People started to follow me when they started to see my success.
Right.
But all of that came to the redeveloping of my brain to where I began to recognize, hey, I'm better than being an inmate. I'm better than someone counting me as like I'm a hog or a sheep or something, right? A piece of stock with no value.
Right.
Because as long as you locked in those spaces, no one really value you. We started to throw all these accolades on people after they come home and then they achieve a certain amount of success.
Right.
Which is rare for people that's coming out of those settings, because most people have not been properly prepared to come out here and deal with this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It's good stuff, man. Well, for the sake of time, Renaldo, I wanna be sensitive to your time and folks. I mean, I think we hit some awesome topics. I hope it was intriguing to you. Please go check out IllinoisPrisonProject.org. See what they do. There's tons of great resources on there, tons of great videos. They are our give back organization for this month. And so 10% of all our sales are going to them. And you hear right here from the director of education. I think there's some amazing underlying concepts that if we can start to adapt and adapt to and adopt as our language, we can see it take effect from a societal perspective. So Renaldo, I appreciate your time, man. And definitely look forward to staying in touch. And hopefully this is my most popular podcast yet.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, man. Like, I challenge people to not like me. Yeah. Right. Because I think what happens is people don't meet real people. And I'm real people and you real people. And that's why we just jail.
Yeah.
Right? It's just real.
Get mad. Get Mad Priest Coffee.